morning. I'm Mayla Hsu, Director of Research and Science at Global Lyme Alliance. I'm here today at Western Connecticut State University with Dr. Neeta Connally, who is a professor of biology here at the university. Neeta, glad to meet you.
Great to see you.
So you're trained as a medical entomologist. Do you want to tell me what a PhD in medical entomology does?
Absolutely. So a medical entomologist is someone who studies insects and arthropods that transmit diseases to humans. And so that can include such organisms as mosquitoes or ticks or sandflies and fleas. And so really we know that a lot of insects and arthropods will carry pathogens of disease-causing organisms, bacteria, viruses, parasites, and they can transmit those to humans.
So your major research interest is ticks, isn't it? And do you want to tell me a little bit about your work?
Absolutely. So the primary focus of the research program here in my lab is the prevention of tick-borne diseases in the northeastern United States, primarily those transmitted by the black-legged tick, also known as the deer tick. And our focus is on prevention really zoomed into the landscape of one's own backyard. And we know that a lot of people in this region of the country are exposed to ticks in their own backyards. And so we're trying to do a better job at understanding the science behind how we can keep people from getting a tick bite and getting a tick-borne illness.
Okay, so your main focus sounds like it's on ticks. As we all know, ticks are carriers of Lyme disease and other bacterial and viral diseases. Do you want to tell me more about the diseases that are spread by these ticks?
Oh, sure. So in our region, which is here in the northeastern U.S., the primary tick that bites humans is the black-legged tick, or the deer tick. And we know that tick to be implicated in 5 primary infectious agents of humans. And those 5 major ones are, of course, Lyme disease, and the one that causes human granulocytic anaplasmosis, which has formerly been called ehrlichiosis. Some people still call it that. We have babesiosis, which is a red blood cell parasite that's very much looks like malaria. And then we have a viral agent that is known as Powassan virus. But this variant of this disease, or of this virus, has been called deer tick virus. And so then we also have a newly identified Borrelia. It sort of looks a little like our Lyme disease bacteria. It's called Borrelia Miyamotoi, and that causes an illness that can have sort of a relapsing fever type of clinical presentation. And so those are the 5 major ones associated with this tick. And, the tick is full of all sorts of microorganisms. And so I think that, we know there's a lot of things in the tick. And so I think that only time will tell, what if any, role those other microorganisms play. So, for example, that Borrelia Miyamotoi, when I was a PhD student, we knew that it was there in some of our ticks, but we didn't think it was a human pathogen. And so we sort of discounted it and didn't think anything of it. It wasn't until very recently that now we know that it does cause disease. And so I think, we know there's a lot of things in these ticks. And so right now we say these are the 5 major ones. It doesn't mean that there aren't other things in those ticks that are causing people to be sick.
Now, what's particularly special about your work that I understand you received a very large research grant from the Centers for Disease Control very recently to set up a very kind of unique study.
Yes, so we've been really fortunate to partner with the Centers for Disease Control for many years and work on various types of intervention studies looking at ways we can reduce ticks and if that tick reduction will result in the reduction of people being bitten by ticks and also in the reduction of the incidence of Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses. And so in 2016, we received a CDC grant to conduct what we call the Backyard Integrated Tick Management Study. And so in this study, we're looking at a 2-pronged approach to controlling ticks in the backyard. And we're also looking at a neighborhood sort of approach versus just treating your own house. And so we're trying to understand if you and your neighbors got together and tried to kill ticks in your backyard, does that have a bigger impact than just you doing it alone in your own backyard? And so we're implementing a tick spray one time a year, and then we implement a rodent-targeted bait box to kill ticks on the small mammals that carry the Lyme bacteria. And so it's a 3-year study, and we implement the tick control for 2 years, but we also follow the people in the household. And so we're trying to understand what they do outdoors, how they use their backyard landscape, and also how often they're exposed to ticks and how often they will get a tick-borne illness. And so it's a very multifaceted, intensive study.
I think one of the things that struck me that was really strong about your study is that you're also incorporating a placebo control into it, right? So some of the yards get a pesticide spray and some of the yards don't. And I think you told me once that people don't know.
Correct.
And so why is that a strength of your study?
Absolutely. So because we have humans enrolled in the study, we want to know what happens to them. It's very important that they don't know if they have received treatment. And so what we do is we implement either the true treatment or we implement a placebo, and it's a blinded study, which means that the homeowners and their families who are enrolled know they're getting something put in their yard, but they don't know if it's the true treatment or if they're getting the placebo. And the placebo would be, instead of the pesticide, we spray water, and instead of a bait box that contains the treatment for the ticks in it, it doesn't have that. It's an empty bait box.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's supposed to control for their behavior if they think that if they don't know if they have active pesticide or active bait boxes, they're not going to alter their behavior.
Exactly, right. We don't want them to feel a sense of security and therefore change what other preventive measures they may take. And so this is, using placebos is very classic in many other types of study designs, and it makes sense to do it in this case because we really need to understand the human outcomes. And if we were just measuring ticks, we could do that without a placebo, but because we want to measure what the humans are doing, we need to have them not know.
And if I understand, you also have students then going and checking the yards, dragging the yards on a systematic basis to count how many ticks they have. Is this how often do the students go?
Oh yeah, so we have student interns who get trained in tick collection, and they help us go out and collect ticks from the properties of the homes, all of the homes enrolled in our study. And our study is taking place here in Western Connecticut and also in Southern Rhode Island with our collaborator Tom Mather at the University of Rhode Island. And so there are students from URI as well who participate in this. And so the students go out during the nymph season of the tick. That's the poppy seed size tick stage that is most implicated in causing Lyme disease just because of the time of year that it's active and it's very difficult to see. And so we are collecting nymph stage ticks between late May and July. We go out multiple times to each of the properties and we collect ticks from all those properties, and we can then assess the density of ticks in those backyards, and we can also make sure those are indeed the black-legged tick or the deer tick and not some other tick species.
And speaking of those other species, I believe also your lab was one of the first to identify the newly invasive Asian longhorned tick. Is that correct?
That's
here?
correct. So since 2011, we've been monitoring tick populations at 3 locations in this part of the state. And actually last year we added one more site, so we have 4. And so what that means is we've been going out every week from the beginning of May until August, and we collect ticks at these locations to sort of monitor their populations. Are they high? Are they low? Are the ticks coming out earlier? Are they declining sooner than we expect? Or are they staying? Is their population staying active? And so this has been a really useful piece of information for us for a lot of reasons. But what happened was at one of our monitoring sites last summer, one of our student interns was astute enough when collecting ticks to see that she had collected a tick, but it didn't look anything like the tick species we normally collect during our drag sampling. And she was observant enough and aware enough to say, okay, I'm going to bring that back and we're going to take a look. She brought it back, and it was just around the time there was a lot of interest in this Asian longhorn tick that had been found in several other states, including our neighbors over here in New York State and in New Jersey. And so we ended up cutting off a leg and sending it to Dr. Andrea Agizi at Rutgers. She was the first person to test the DNA of these ticks to identify it as an invasive species, and so she did confirm it was the first Asian longhorn tick detected here in the state of Connecticut. And since that time, there's been one more detected by the Connecticut Ag Station, and so we're still looking. Part of our work this summer will involve increased monitoring, and we're implementing a veterinarian survey to try and look for the ticks throughout the region that might come in on cats and dogs as well. And we're also working with our partners at Great Hollow Nature Preserve up in New Fairfield. They're going to be nest netting some birds for us, and they're going to be pulling the ticks from the birds, and we're going to inspect them to see if we can find any of the longhorn ticks traveling on migrating bird populations.
And why should we be worried about this Asian longhorn tick?
Oh, that's a great question. So in Asia, where the Asian longhorn tick is native, it's been implicated in causing primarily a viral illness that's highly fatal. It's very serious, and it also has, in places where it's invasive, like Australia and New Zealand, while it hasn't been a major issue with public health of humans, it's caused a very big problem with the health of livestock. So, cattle and sheep have been heavily parasitized by this tick, and so it's of great economic importance. And here in the U.S., of course, we're concerned for the agricultural reasons, but also because we know that this tick can transmit this virus. It's also transmitted a Rickettsia species in its native habitat, and so we don't know. What is it going to do? What can it carry? We have another virus of ticks that is called Heartland Virus, and it's very genetically not that different than the virus that we see in Asia, in the Asian longhorn tick. So we wonder, is there some potential for this tick to also carry Heartland virus, which we do have here in the U.S. And so I think that there's a lot of unknowns, and right now I think all of the tick researchers are trying to figure out the story, right?
Yeah.
What's going on with this tick? Where is it going to go? How is it going to be spread? What different pathogens can it carry? So it's a kind of, we've got a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of questions.
We need more research, and we need more money for research to answer these questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, part of your studies are also, this is very fascinating to think about, part of your studies are also including a social science aspect. You're interested in human behaviors and how they are impacted, or how we react to all of this. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I can. Sometimes I say that we're actually not too bad at controlling ticks, but we aren't so good at controlling people, obviously, and it's really hard to change human behavior, and we don't know a lot about one, how people are exposed to ticks, meaning we know how they encounter them, but are some people more tick attractive than others, for example? Or are there certain behaviors that are really more risky than others? I think we don't really have a good handle on that. And on top of that, when we do identify practices that work, such as, we know that if you can spray your yard with the right thing at the right time, you can really do a good job at reducing your tick populations. But then we have this whole piece of, the barrier to adopting practices that involve chemicals. Even wearing repellents. So we know that repellents that contain, 25% or more DEET are very effective at repelling ticks. But there's this whole social piece of, perception about repellents and about chemicals, and that's just one example.
And some of your other work that you've been doing that's not directly connected to the backyard studies have involved things like testing repellents, and do you want to share some of that information?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of products now on the market that will say on the label that it will repel ticks or it will kill ticks, and there's really a gap in the body of knowledge about how well they work. And because of the way regulation works, some things that contain like natural ingredients aren't necessarily regulated in the same way that some of our other compounds are regulated. And so you really, for many of these products, you can write whatever you want on the label. And so we've had an interest in looking at some of these like botanical repellents to try and understand if there are some that are more effective than others. And also we recently finished doing a pretty intensive investigation of tick repellent clothing. So you can buy clothing that's been impregnated with a tick repellent called permethrin. You can also treat your own clothing with permethrin, and it can last for several washings. And so that's great if you want to go out and go gardening in these clothes, or you're spending time outside, or you want to send your kids to camp. And so we did some work with that, and we found that, you know, actually this treated clothing does a pretty good job of repelling and knocking down ticks and even killing the ticks. And so I think that, you know, some of these things, you know, they probably need a little more evaluation, because we know that they lose their effectiveness over time. How often do they need to be treated? But I think, you know, it's actually a really great tool that can be used for tick bite prevention. But again, now we have the
human behavior.
The human behavior
part.
where people say, oh my gosh, you're putting that in my
Yeah.
clothing, I'm not sure if I want to wear that. And so that piece of adoption of practice is still one that we need to figure out. But there's a lot still yet to be evaluated.
And let me ask you this. I've heard that the majority of the time we get exposed to ticks in our own yards, hence your backyard study. It could be something as innocuous as just walking to your mailbox to get your mail. And in those instances, we're not thinking that we need to wear the permethrin-treated
Yeah.
clothes, or we need to spray ourselves just to walk to the mailbox. And yet, if we think of going hiking, you know, we pull out the heavy armamentarium
Oh, yeah.
of boots and everything, and the treated clothes and the
Yeah.
sprays. And maybe, you know, part of the behavior is adjusting our thinking to always be on guard, even for those more mundane kinds of activities. And do you think that that's something that people need to adjust in their thinking?
Absolutely. I mean, I hope that we can make, you know, personal protection behaviors like performing a tick check or bathing shortly after being outside something that's very rote and automatic in the way that we think of other prevention behaviors. So, you know, we fasten our seatbelt, we wear sunscreen, we want to prevent cancer, right? We try not to smoke. And I think that if we could have some of these prevention behaviors be sort of automatic, it would really serve us well.
I think there is definitely a storytelling aspect to all of this, and to this end, I think you've also been trying hard. I understand you've produced a series of videos that we want to talk about, and we want to plug. Should we hold this up?
Please, that would be great.
Okay, so
can you see that? Okay,
yeah,
great.
do you want to tell us about the videos?
Sure. So in 2017, I'm sorry, we received a Healthy Communities grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and that grant helped us produce a series of short films. They're about 3 to 5 minutes each, 5 of them, in a project we're calling Spray Safe, Play Safe. And we are airing these in a movie premiere event at the Ridgefield Playhouse on April 10th this year. And our event is called Tick Control Gets Real, and it really is in an attempt to demystify some of the, the details about, how you might prevent tick bites in your backyard. And we have a special emphasis, because this is an EPA-funded project, around safe and judicious and effective pesticide use. And it doesn't mean we think everyone should spray pesticides. We just want people who think that they might want to spray pesticides, know how to make informed choices and do it safely, not just safely for their family and their pets, but also safely for the environment. And not everybody needs to spray. Maybe they don't have the right circumstances that they need to. So we're trying to, help people understand, do a better job of communicating the science so that people can make informed choices. So it's a new path for us, but we're really excited to share the information and show these videos. So
I think this sounds great.
Yeah.
I really want to see this. The Ridgefield Playhouse
Right.
in Ridgefield, Connecticut, April 10th, 2019 at 6 p.m. Free admission, I believe.
Yes, but it is free, but you do need to register.
Okay.
And the website is spraysafeplaysafe.org. It's one word. We've been doing this in partnership with our long-term partner, which has been the Town of Ridgefield Health Department. They have a wonderful program. It's the BLAST Tickborne Disease Prevention Program that's been going for more than a decade now, and we're excited to see this all come together and share it with our communities.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank
Neeta
you.
Connally.
Thanks.